Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're taking a massive, fascinating zoom-in, zoom-out journey. We're going to look at India's macroeconomic planning. But we're not just staying in the clouds with the policy stuff. We want to see how these broad national blueprints actually hit the dirt, literally altering the Earth itself. We'll explore how these grand plans tried to fix extreme regional imbalances across the subcontinent, and how ultimately these huge human interventions forced us to totally redefine development. It went from just chasing economic growth to realizing we desperately need global sustainability. It's a huge story, so let's jump right in. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll unpack India's master plan. Then, we'll see how planners targeted regional imbalances. After that, we've got two mind-blowing case studies: greening the scorching Thar Desert and empowering the isolated Gaudy tribe up in the Himalayas. Finally, we'll pull all the way back out to look at the massive global shift towards sustainability.
Section 1. India's Master Plan. Okay, to understand how you even begin to develop a country with this kind of immense scale and crazy geographic complexity, we gotta look at the starting line. Historically, this monumental task was handed to the Planning Commission. This was a seriously powerful body headed directly by the Prime Minister, and their main weapon of choice to steer the entire nation's economic destiny? The famous five-year plans.
If we trace this enormous planning effort, it all kicks off in 1951 with the first five-year plan. That set the economic wheels in motion for the newly independent nation. But, reality rarely sticks to a neat schedule. By the mid-1960s, things got rough. Two severe droughts completely devastated agricultural output, and on top of that, a 1965 war with Pakistan essentially drained the country's resources. Planners had to hit the brakes. They called them plan holidays, basically pausing the five-year cycle to run short-term annual plans just to manage the immediate crises. Fast forward through decades of adapting to a constantly changing world, and we hit 2007, when the approach for the 11th plan was approved, pointedly titled Towards Faster and More Inclusive Growth. Now, as these plans evolved over the years, the core strategy itself really had to pivot. In the beginning, the big focus was on sectoral planning. That basically means creating broad schemes to boost specific sectors everywhere at once, pouring money into agriculture or transport or power on a national scale. But here's the catch: spreading resources evenly across a massive, highly varied geography just doesn't work. Why? Because some areas, just by luck of geography or history, will always surge ahead, while others are left lagging painfully behind. So, planners realized they absolutely had to shift to regional planning. This meant taking a spatial perspective to actively target and fix those deep geographical imbalances. Which brings us to Section 2, targeting regional imbalances. After about 15 years of planning, it became glaringly obvious that without highly targeted interventions, regional disparities weren't just stubbornly persisting, they were actually getting worse. Economic growth was just clustering in pockets that were already developed. And what's really wild is that it wasn't just the resource-poor areas that were struggling. In some cases, regions absolutely packed with natural resources remained incredibly backward. They just lacked the infrastructure, the technology, or the investment to actually harness what was literally right under their feet. To stop this growing divide, the Planning Commission rolled out target area and target group programs. Think of these as highly specialized surgical strikes for economic development. For instance, the Drought-Prone Area Program used a strict cutoff from the 1972 Irrigation Commission, zeroing in exclusively on areas with less than 30% irrigated land. Then you had the Hill Area Development Program, specifically aimed at struggling mountainous regions above 600 meters in elevation. They even set up agencies purely focused on small and marginal farmers. So instead of a one-size-fits-all policy, we're talking about development custom-tailored to specific challenging environments and vulnerable people.
Section 3. Greening the Thar Desert. To really grasp what these targeted plans look like on the ground, we have to see them in action. And this is one of the most ambitious human interventions in geography anywhere on the planet, the Indira Gandhi Canal Project. It is the perfect example of broad policy translating into a literal, earth-moving reality. 9,060 kilometers. Just let that sheer mind-boggling scale sink in for a second. That is the total planned length of the canal system. Starting at the Harike Barrage up in Punjab and running right parallel to the Pakistan border, this massive winding artery of water had one colossal goal: to irrigate nearly 20 lakh hectares of land right smack in the middle of the hyper-dry Marastali region of Rajasthan. To truly appreciate how revolutionary this was, you've got to put yourself in that unforgiving environment.
50 degrees Celsius. That's how blistering hot the summer temperatures get in the Stage 2 command area of the canal, out in districts like Beacon and Jayselmer. We are talking about a harsh desert landscape, totally dominated by shifting sand dunes. Before the canal was built, soil moisture was the absolute bottleneck for any kind of agriculture. Just surviving out here meant battling the extreme elements every single day.
But then, the water arrived, and the introduction of intensive canal irrigation completely flipped the ecology, the economy, and the society of this desert practically overnight. Traditional, tough, drought-resistant crops like gram and bajra were rapidly swapped out for super water-hungry commercial crops. Suddenly, you've got vast new fields of wheat, cotton, groundnut, and, incredibly, even rice growing right in the middle of the desert. Alongside this, rigorous afforestation and pasture programs literally turned the landscape green, which massively cut down on the wind erosion and siltation that had choked the area for centuries. But, nature always pushes back. This brilliant human intervention perfectly highlights the core tension of massive environmental engineering. Yes, that intensive irrigation sparked a tremendous initial boom in crops and livestock, a literal greening of the desert. But it also triggered some severe unintended consequences. Pumping all that water into a desert birthed the twin environmental nightmares of waterlogging and soil salinity. So in the long run, the very water that miraculously brought the desert to life actually started to threaten the sustainability of the agriculture itself. It's a really powerful lesson in ecological balance. Section 4, Empowering the Gadi Tribe. From the scorching heat of the desert, we're taking a drastic pivot. We're leaving the sand dunes far behind and heading high up into the freezing, lofty mountains of the Himalayas, specifically into the Parmar tribal region in Himachal Pradesh. 4 degrees Celsius. That is the mean monthly temperature here in January. Talk about a contrast from our desert case study, right? This area is the traditional homeland of the Gadi tribal community, and it's completely boxed in by the towering, snow-capped Pur Panjal and Dala Dar mountain ranges. The Gadis have maintained a super distinct identity for centuries. They practice transhumance, meaning they moved seasonally with their flocks between high mountain pastures and lower valleys, all while speaking their own unique Gadiali dialect, completely cut off from the plains below. This is a region entirely defined by extreme geographical isolation, a brutally harsh climate, and a critically low resource base. The reality of that isolation is pretty stark. As recently as the 2001 census, the population density was just 20 people per square kilometer. For a very long time, the Geddes faced deep socioeconomic deprivation and severe political isolation. To get by, they relied almost entirely on basic subsistence agriculture and their traditional sheep and goat rearing. Realizing just how isolated and backward this region was, the government stepped in and designated Barmore as an Integrated Tribal Development Project, or ITDP, in 1974. The goal was massive: bridge that deep development gap. And the social victories that followed were absolutely profound. Just look at these numbers. In 1971, female literacy in this rugged terrain was an abysmal 1.88%. But by 2001, thanks to heavily targeted investments in local schools, reliable roads, and healthcare clinics, female literacy skyrocketed to nearly 43%. That severe historical gender gap in education finally began to close. And right alongside that incredible social progress came a massive economic shift. Today, the cultivation of profitable pulses and cash crops has shot up in the region, even if many farmers are still using traditional farming tech. Now, the Gadis are still highly mobile. A lot of families migrate down to Kangra for winter wage labor, but their pure traditional pastoral economy is definitely shrinking. Today, only about 1/10 of households still practice that traditional transhumance. The ITDP fundamentally altered their way of life, successfully pulling a once isolated mountain people into the broader modern economy. Section 5, the shift to sustainability. Okay, this brings us to a really crucial global realization. Through these two wildly different case studies, we've seen how targeted development can bring life-altering benefits, like new schools and booming crop yields. But we've also seen how it can accidentally trigger severe ecological degradation, like those waterlogged deserts. Well, that micro-level tension perfectly mirrors a massive macro-level shift in how the whole world has understood development over the last few decades. Think about the post-World War II era. Back then, development was a simple equation. It just meant economic growth, pumping up the gross national product.
But by the 1970s, as extreme poverty stubbornly stuck around right next to booming economic growth, people realized the definition had to expand. It had to include social equity and wealth redistribution. And then a massive ecological awakening hit. In the late 60s and early 70s, books like Paul Ehrlich's The Population Bomb and the Club of Rome's The Limits to Growth spread like wildfire. They sparked global anxiety about the toxic side effects of unchecked industrialization. All this rising awareness eventually led the UN to create the World Commission on Environment and Development, which published the truly game-changing Brundtland Report in 1987.
And how this commission completely redefined human progress is probably the most important takeaway of this whole explainer. The Brundtland Report famously defines sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It totally shifted the global paradigm. It declared that true development isn't just a number on a balance sheet. It's a multidimensional puzzle. You have to balance ecological health, social equity, and economic prosperity all at the exact same time, keeping our shared future in mind.
So if we take that vital global concept and apply it right back to our Thar Desert case study, what does it look like? Experts laid out strict, actionable steps to pull the Indira Gandhi Canal region back from the brink of ecological collapse. Achieving true sustainability there means a massive push for ecological restoration. That means enforcing super strict water management policies so people don't overuse it. It means banning water-hungry crops like rice in the middle of a desert and swapping them for sustainable plantation crops like citrus. And it means doing the hard work of actively reclaiming those damaged, waterlogged soils while continuing aggressive eco-development through widespread afforestation. Which leaves us with the ultimate challenge. Whether we're planning for a nation of over 1 billion people, routing life-saving water into a scorching desert, or empowering isolated mountain tribes through targeted education, the central tension is always exactly the same. Can we balance our human needs today without bankrupting the Earth of tomorrow? It is absolutely the defining question of modern economic planning. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into planning and sustainability. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.